another episode of Well-Adjusted Mama. I'm your host, Dr. Laura Brayton, and today's guest is Laura Lagano, speaking on pregnancy prep. Laura Lagano, MS, RDN, CDN, is a nutritionist and health educator who integrates her classic background as a registered dietitian with cutting-edge training in functional medicine. Laura brings a range of experience in the food and nutrition world to the table. She entered the field of functional medicine and nutrition organically. She followed the path set by her children. Raising a child with a seizure disorder and apraxia has provided Laura with deep insight into life as both a parent and a health professional. This experience and Laura's own holistic health journey have informed her style of nutrition and health counseling. Laura's inspiring story combined with her nutrition experience and communication know-how form a winning combination for her clients. Laura's immersed herself in the world of food, nutrition, and healing for over 30 years and continues to do so. She received advanced training in clinical nutrition and biochemistry from the Institute of Functional Medicine, which enabled Laura to bridge her formal nutrition education with functional medicine to provide integrative clinical nutrition services. She will be among a handful of dietitian nutritionists certified in functional medicine. For more information, please visit her website at lauralagano.com. Welcome, Laura.
Thank you, Laura.
Laura has been a very close friend of mine for years, and I'm so excited to finally get her on the podcast. She originally was going to be my first guest, and then that interview got rescheduled, so here we are. But I'm so thrilled because I really admire the work that you do here in Hoboken with nutrition, and you have such a strong background with nutrition and functional medicine that I think it's hugely valuable for women, especially when they're preparing their bodies for pregnancy.
Great. Thank you for that introduction.
Yes, you're welcome. So let's get started. So if a woman is thinking about and planning on preparing for pregnancy, when is the best time for her to start?
Well, I think just about any time is a good time to start. I sort of hesitate to give a date. I think one of the we always say in the medical or healthcare world, preparing, X number of months or years in advance. So let's say in this case, if we said 1 year in advance, I would hate to think that a woman who didn't prepare 1 year in advance said, oh, you know what, it's not enough time. So even if it's 6 months in advance or 3 months in advance, or even if somebody is already pregnant and hasn't planned for pregnancy prep, it's not too late. So I really think any time is a good time. Obviously, the sooner the better, but, I don't want to put anybody off by telling them that they've started too late.
Yeah, and I have heard that, like in an ideal world, 1 year would be ideal, but it is also like life happens, and not all pregnancies, in fact, a lot of pregnancies are not planned, so there's still a lot that can be done even after the fact.
Right, and what I'd also like to mention, I think we're always talking about the moms here. It's not just for the mothers who are planning.
Right.
Fathers provide half of the genetic material. They may not be feeding the embryo along the way and gestating it, but the father does provide half of the genetic material. So it also is important for the dad to prepare for the pregnancy.
Very good point. So let's talk about that. You kind of, started to explain the genetic component as one reason why it's really important for a mother and father to prepare. What else is important? Why else can prepping for pregnancy, how can that add value?
Well, I think one of the things that we look at, and unless you're living under a rock right now, we've all heard about genes and environment. And, years ago, there was always an argument, is it genes or is it the environment, as if you had to pick one or the other. And, of course, we know that is not the case at all. The environment that you live in, and when we say the using the term environment, that means everything. That's, not just where you live, but also how you live, the food you're eating, the air you're breathing, the products you're using, and how that can influence your genetic makeup. So just to give you, a basic example of that, we know, for instance, that there's a set of genes that are responsible for something that occurs in every cell in our body called methylation. And we know that the particular gene SNPs, which is a shortened terminology for a longer, complicated word, can be responsible for several different outcomes. So we see that if you're lacking, for instance, methylated folate in your diet, and oftentimes you would need to take this in a supplemented amount, this can result in bipolar disorder, ADHD, or even having a child with Down syndrome. So this is a very, very simple test, which, though it is a genetic test, all the labs will pay for it. It's not an expensive test to have. So that's just a simple, one of basic ways that how we live can affect our genes.
Right. Can you mention the name of that test?
It's what is the name that it goes by? I believe
MTHFR?
Yes, the MTHFR test. Thank you.
And so if a woman and a man, and now this is, I'm so glad you reminded me, a man or a woman, both who are planning on creating a family together, can both get tested via blood for this genetic SNP, and to see if they're missing a gene that actually helps their body convert methylate the folate.
Right. Well, they're not necessarily missing the gene. It depends on the gene profile. Is it heterozygous? Is it homozygous? But then once that test result comes in, that would determine whether or not you needed a higher dose of methylated folate. Standardly, many obstetricians give folate, but that's a very small dose, and that's to avoid neural tube defects. But this is taking it a whole step further. I mean, there are many tests, for instance, that newborns have to see right away if they have something like PKU, to determine whether or not they might be prone, they're missing an enzyme that deals with phenylalanine.
Right.
But we have put all of these tests into, the standard of care. Why can't we put some of these other tests into the standard of care? I think it will get there eventually. We just are not at that point yet.
And what you're also saying is prior to conception, a future mom and a future dad can both get tested, because if a father also has a mutation in that gene, he also needs to be supplementing with methylated folate, correct? For the health of his genetics that are in the sperm. And that's also, so it could be coming from mom or dad, so both parents want to have that awareness if this is an issue for them. And I got tested for this, and it was a very simple and easy blood test. So that's a good awareness for people to have prior. And if you're not taking, so in other words, the solution is just to take a supplement. Now, pregnancy vitamin contains folic acid, like you mentioned, but it's typically not methylated, right?
Correct. It's typically not methylated, and it's also a very, very low dose, because most of the supplements that are out there, whether it's a supplement that is considered a daily supplement, whether for a man or a woman, pregnant or not, they generally contain just very, very basic amounts. The RDAs that were developed are specifically to avoid major nutrition deficiency diseases that most of us have never seen here in the United States. It's pretty rare to see things like beriberi or rickets, although rickets have been a little bit more problematic recently. which is the vitamin D deficiency. So the amounts that I'm talking about are not to avoid, vitamin deficiency diseases. They're to move along metabolic processes. So this is where the word functional comes in. When you talk about functional nutrition or functional medicine, you're actually pushing the metabolic process along to optimize it, rather than just have something work at a basic level and avoid a deficiency disease. So this is a whole
right. This is much more about optimizing health.
Correct, and prevention and preventing other issues from occurring that may seem insidious. Things generally do not develop overnight. Take, for instance, something like diabetes. People don't go from not having, to having normal and healthy blood sugars and insulin levels to having diabetes overnight. It develops over a long period of time, maybe even 40 years. The same with things like Alzheimer's or even, obesity. It doesn't happen, over a year. These things happen over long periods of time.
Right. That's so true. So can you give our audience some, easy, important steps and actions to take to help for pregnancy prep, whether they're a man or a woman?
Sure. I would say there's probably two, if we break down things into two categories, what to include and what to avoid. So let's talk about what to avoid first to get that out of the way. I would say the most basic thing to avoid, or let's just say what we want to accomplish, is we want to reduce our toxic load. We live in a toxic world. I think we all know that. The air we breathe, the products we use, the foods we eat, and we just need to try to reduce that toxic load. And the reason why is many years ago there was a study done looking at cord blood of newborns and found 200 plus chemicals, most of which were toxic to newborns. Obviously that's a problem because the mother is passing along all those toxins to the baby. So the baby is starting off not on the best foot. So what we want to do is reduce that toxic load right at the get-go. So the first thing we need to do to reduce the toxic load is take a look and see what are the toxins that we're taking in. Now, we know air we breathe. We can't do anything about that, really. People aren't moving to Iceland. So we have to just leave alone. But let's look at the products that we use. So I'd say there are about three categories of products. There's food products, which we'll talk about last, personal products, and cleaning products. Most people don't think about these things. But let's take I like to take the cleaning products as the first thing that I talk to my patients about because those are generally the easiest thing for people to change. Most people are not attached to their cleaning products. So, and cleaning products, interestingly enough, are the last consumer product. Another one, a consumable that has no labeling, meaning that we cannot look at, you can't look at a label for any of the standard, cleaning products and see what the ingredients are. There's no labeling.
Oh.
Isn't that interesting?
It is interesting. You're saying a cleaning product does not have to put its ingredients.
Correct. And those are the only products that we buy, that we consume, that you consume in other ways than eating, that we use up, that are not telling us what is in the product. So
right, even our clothes have, labels that tell us, 100% cotton or polyester, exactly. Or tells us at least what the clothes are made out of. That's really interesting. I had no idea.
Yes. And in this country, we use a lot of products, cleaning products and also personal products that contain ingredients that are very deleterious for our health. So the first thing I ask people to do is go out, and it's so much easier now to find products that don't contain those deleterious ingredients. And I'm going to give brand names because people buy brands. I think it's very elusive just to give, descriptions of products. So my favorite brands are, one of them is called Seventh Generation, and Seventh Generation that's taken from, the Native American culture, looking at preserving our land for 7 generations. So that's where there's a nice backstory behind that particular company. There's another company called Ecover. So there's several companies out there that more than these two. And the interesting thing is now you can find those products at big box stores. You don't necessarily have to go to a quote-unquote health food store. Years ago when I was counseling people about this, there were no products, and I was asking people who some were willing and some were not to use things like white vinegar and baking soda, which in actuality is really all you need to clean your house.
Right.
You can make your own, cleaning products. There is one other product. There's a company that's 100 years old. They make a scouring powder, and it's called Bon Ami, and it's a great product. I always like to plug them because they've been around for 100 years, so they must be doing something right. So I think that's the first line of defense is cleaning products. The second one is the personal products. So that means everything from, shampoo, toothpaste, makeup, soap. And again, this is very, very easy to do. My advice is to go on a website, Google Skin Deep, and that will give you actually a list of chemicals that are banned actually in Europe that we still use here, that are either carcinogenic, meaning cancer-causing, or endocrine disruptors. Now, the last thing you want at any time in your life, but particularly when you're trying to get pregnant, is an endocrine disruptor. We have found that many of these products, and I think the one that people know the most is something called BPA, bisphenol A, which is a plasticizer, which is not only found in plastic bottles but can be used in other products. But that type of endocrine disruptor can result in problems with fertility, as well as some pretty serious side effects. We see young boys developing excessive breast tissue. So we do want to avoid any of those products. You can get that list on the Skin Deep website, and I believe they also have a function there where you can put in the product you're using and see how it rates, where it comes in.
Yeah, it's an app that you can have on your phone and scan barcodes of different products to see the safety.
Generally, the sad reality is most of the products that we find, particularly in makeup at department stores, the vast majority of them contain many of these products that we don't want to have as part of our daily routine. The good news is that you can now find makeup that works, and that is a great substitute or alternative for often a lot less money. That doesn't contain, the plasticizers or the endocrine disruptors or the carcinogenic ingredients. So that's the second line of defense. Actually, there's 4. The third we'll talk about is food. And for food, I think the first thing to do is take out any artificial ingredients out of your diet. So that means artificial colors, flavors, and preservatives and dyes would be the 4 main artificial ingredients, and of course artificial sweeteners as well. And again, it has become much easier because for many foods that contain artificial ingredients, and believe it or not, things like cereals are loaded with artificial ingredients, preservatives, of course, but even food coloring. I'm not talking like Lucky Charms, which we all know has food coloring. I'm talking about even some brand type of cereals which have the perception of being quote-unquote healthy, but often contain a yellow dye, which is one of the more dangerous dyes.
Wow.
So you want to, read ingredients, read labels for that, and then of course, and this is. We can't really go into a lot of detail with food just on a phone interview, but looking more at what would be a whole food diet, so less processed food and more whole foods. You do not necessarily have to be a vegan or a vegetarian, for the type of food plan that I am referring to. You can certainly be a vegan or a vegetarian and still eat well, but I don't want people to walk away with the idea that you have to go in that direction. I think the best thing to look at is avoiding all artificial ingredients, cutting down a lot on processed, and certainly cutting down on processed food, eating way more in the vegetable and fruit area. We should be having 9 to 11 servings of fruits and vegetables a day, and we fall well below that. So looking into, that is really the way to go to optimize your daily food intake. And the fourth item is actually drinking water. And there's a little saying that is, the solution to pollution is dilution. So that is really a great way to detoxify. And I have people who say to me, well, if I drink so much water, then I have to go to the bathroom all the time. Well, that is the point.
That's
you
the
need
detox.
To be. Yes, that is. I mean, what are the ways that we detox? It's through, obviously, bowel movements and urinating and sweating. I mean, those are our primary forms of detoxifying. So you really need to get rid of those toxins that way, and you do want to have a bowel movement every day. If you're not having a bowel movement every day, something is not right. So drinking about half your weight in ounces of water is the general rule of thumb that I like.
Right, and making sure it's clean water too. I know you're a big advocate for that as well.
Absolutely. And a good way to know if you're getting what you need is to actually measure the water ahead of time. So if you weigh 120 pounds, then you need 60 ounces of water, and don't just guess at that. Measure out the 60 ounces, at least in the beginning, for a few days, so you know what 60 ounces looks like. And I find that when people drink down from what they need rather than drink up, it can be much more helpful, so that you know it's 3 o'clock and you realize, oh my goodness, I've only had 10 ounces of water, which happens a lot with people who are very busy. So, make sure you carry around that BPA-free water bottle, preferably glass. Even if it is BPA-free plastic, I still prefer glass.
Right, and the reason is because of the phytoestrogens, or not the the xenoestrogens in the plastic.
Correct. And listen, plastic has certainly been a boon to our culture and society. It's enabled us to do a lot of things. Everybody remembers it's a big scene from the movie The Graduate. But glass is really the way to go. First of all, it doesn't degrade. Plastic, even though you can't see it breaking down, it is breaking down. And you don't want that off-gassing or those chemicals in getting into your water and then getting into your system. So if you have an employer and you can talk them into having glass bottles or a glass water cooler delivered to your office, that would be great. The brand that I like is actually Mountain Valley Spring Water. And if you mention my name, they will give you a discount.
Yes. It's delicious.
It tastes a lot better, I'll tell you.
It does. And, I have one question, too, about this. So I definitely agree those glass bottles are better than plastic. What about the stainless steel water bottles, like the canteens?
I think that's an interesting question. I mean, I know that there's a lot of stainless steel water bottles out there, and I think they seem to be preferable, certainly, to plastic. I am not sure how I feel about those because I don't know what if the jury is out on if there's any metal leaching. Because certainly, and we haven't talked about this, heavy metals are also a problem. There's actually another category of things we can talk about for reducing toxic load, and that is cookware and food storage. Mm-hmm. So I would never, if you have any Teflon, I would definitely get rid of it. I don't, though the product in the Teflon definitely breaks down upon heat. And if you're worried about your eggs or other things sticking, go back to old school cast iron. Cast iron pots and a cast iron pan is very inexpensive, or a ceramic coated cast iron pan. They're everywhere. You can get, the higher end brands like a Le Creuset or, J.C. Penney, I believe, has a Martha Stewart type. Another brand, I can't think of its name right now. It's, a much lower price brand, but there's tons of them available. And they're
not going to have those chemicals.
Correct. And then also for your food storage, people use a lot of plastic in food storage, and obviously when you're making your kids' lunches or you're traveling, it can be difficult to carry a lot of glass with you, not to mention it's breakable. So to use the BPA-free plastic containers would be a very important thing to do. And, at home also you could use things like, some of these companies are very old, like Anchor Hocking and Corning. These are very old companies that make glass and ceramic containers for food storage. Easy to find and inexpensive. And they don't break down. I mean, think about the fact that when you use plastic at home, you're eventually throwing it out because you can see that it's degraded. Sometimes it gets sticky. The tops don't fit on as well. So we actually can witness the degradation of the plastic. It's not something that is foreign to people, that particular concept. Well, where do you think that degradation is? It's not just disappearing. It's absorbing into your food and then you're eating it.
And then that that container goes into the landfill, and it takes thousands of years to completely go away.
Right. I mean, right. There's a whole process that goes on that we really would like to avoid. And actually, I thought of something else that would be a good thing to avoid in the kitchen, and that is the use of the microwave. Microwaves change the actual structure of food. And from what I see, most people who microwave, they're using microwave for one reason only, and that's to reheat food. Well, there was a time, and I know many people under a certain age don't remember this, when you used your stovetop to reheat food. It's actually a pretty simple it's really a simple process. You just take your food and you add a small bit of water to it. And yes, you do have to watch it, but it changes our relationship to food. The whole idea, it's not just to make all these changes, it's becoming mindful of the decisions we're making. So as Dr. Brayton just said, becoming mindful of that this plastic container at some point is going to end up in a landfill. And, the microwave, yes, we might be able to put food in and walk away. Well, how about staying with your food? It does not take that long to prepare food. And my rule of thumb with preparing food, and this is a pretty easy thing to do, the food you prepare, it really should take as long or longer to prepare than you do to eat it. People are scarfing down food, and they're preparing it, in a microwave or getting takeout, so it's like a 0 to 3 minute preparation. But the whole part of, remember, if you're preparing for pregnancy and when you're pregnant, you are feeding a life and you're gestating a life. You want to put more into that than just grabbing a processed food off the shelf. It becomes a much more mindful practice.
Spiritual. I mean, this is about nourishment for your body and for your baby.
Correct. Yes.
Yeah. Wow, that's beautiful. So this might be kind of a silly question, but we talked about really the most important things to do for pregnancy prep is really about how to reduce that toxic load. How can a toxic load impact fertility and or miscarriage risk?
Okay. Well, first of all, as we had discussed, the endocrine disruptors can certainly change your fertility without a doubt, because endocrine disruptors can change your menses. So if you're changing how the quality of your menstrual cycle, you're definitely changing your fertility. Now, what we didn't discuss is there are a couple of other things that for certain people can act as toxins, and that product that I know everybody has heard a lot about is gluten. And this is not, I am not going to say that across the board somebody who's preparing for pregnancy should avoid gluten, but for certain people that is important. And one of the ways you can determine that is if you are a woman who has one or more autoimmune conditions, you probably would benefit from not using or not eating any foods that contain gluten, which, gluten is a protein that's found in grains. 3 of the primary grains that it's found in are, wheat, rye, and barley, though it is found in other grains that are less frequently consumed here in this country. But gluten is, if you think of miscarriage in and of itself, is an immune issue. It's an issue where your body is rejecting the embryo, which it sees as foreign. And there's been a lot of research done surrounding miscarriage in the case for women who have autoimmune disease, in which gluten has been seen as the culprit. So I would strongly suggest that if you are one of those women, to make an appointment, with a practitioner such as myself or Dr. Brayton, who can help you determine if you're one of those women who would benefit from removing gluten from your diet, because in that case, it would be a toxin.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the food allergy becomes the toxic load. Right.
No, but it's not a bona fide food allergy, because that would be celiac. But it's the sensitivity and the fact that these women have, an overactive immune system, Yeah. And just to give you an example, what does it mean to have an overactive immune system? Imagine that and I know we know people like this, you're a child who gets bitten by a mosquito and your arm blows up around the area of the bite to a severe amount. That is your immune system going really into overdrive. So that's what we're talking about, is the immune system is just being a little bit hypervigilant, let's just say. Obviously your immune system is very important. It's what keeps us alive in a toxic environment, but it can go overboard for sure.
It can, and you had mentioned the endocrine disruptors that will actually disrupt like a woman's period, her cycle, which would clearly impact fertility. And just to be clear, those endocrine disruptors are just chemicals found in skincare and cleaning products people are using?
Correct. I think mostly the ones that would affect us the most would be the ones in the personal products, for sure. In any of the food containers, the plastic containers.
Plastic.
And also, and people have varying opinions on soy. In general, soy can also affect your endocrine system. And the way most people look at soy, it has to do with at what point in your life you started consuming soy. So what we see is that for women who start consuming soy when they're young girls, it generally does not pose the risk as if they were consuming it, later on in life.
Oh, that's interesting. I've never heard of that.
Yeah.
But what about GMO? I mean, that's a whole other can of worms. It's hard to find non-GMO soy even available anymore.
Have you had a hard time finding that? Because I see, if
so there's
it's
no
organic,
GMO labeling, so a lot of people aren't even aware that there's two different types of soy.
Right. Well, this is the way to look at labeling. If something is labeled organic, it is non-GMO. So that we know for sure. If something has the organic label, it is not genetically modified. But the reverse is not true. So if something says that it's non-GMO, it does not necessarily mean that it's organic. And that's a whole other way also, which we didn't discuss, for reducing toxic load, is
pesticides.
Right, is to avoid pesticides in food, and that, you don't necessarily have to buy everything organic. The most important things to buy organic are anything that has fat in it, because fat is where the toxins are stored, meaning that, any meat products or dairy products are going to have a higher amount of whether it's antibiotics or pesticides in them. Most people think of the produce of fruits and vegetables, but the other foods are also, important. And as far as fruits and vegetables are concerned, there is sort of a pecking order. And a company called the Environmental Working Group, or an organization, I should say, has taken, every year they take a publication that lists the pesticide residues in various fruits and vegetables, and they rate them. They score them as the dirtiest, which they label the dirty dozen, and the clean 15. So, and then there's everything else, of course, in between. But you can get you can find that also online and download that app as well.
Yeah, Skin Deep and Dirty Dozen apps are both created by the Environmental Working Group, and they're a nonprofit organization who's really done the research to help us become educated consumers.
It's a very valuable tool.
Yeah, very, very valuable. Any last thoughts that you'd like to share with our audience today?
I think there's a couple of other things that are important for pregnancy prep are adequate protein and adequate fat. I am hopeful that nobody is using low-fat dairy products, or my biggest pet peeve is ordering an egg white omelet. Just recently, I don't...
Even as a pregnant woman.
Everybody, yes.
Yeah.
Very, very important. The egg thing really infuriates me. I think finally there's been some media coverage on the fact that cholesterol in food has no impact on blood cholesterol, and in fact what people will be telling you finally is that blood cholesterol has no impact on heart disease. So we're going to see that the excessive statin use is really been a big disservice, I believe, to Americans. But now I veered off onto another topic. But fat intake is very, very important. Fat is how you build your brain, and you certainly want to have a child that has a well-functioning brain, and you also want to get adequate protein. Americans in general get adequate protein, so that's generally not a problem. You just want to have, high quality protein. And I would say that for women who are vegans, to definitely get a high quality protein supplement to take during pregnancy prep and pregnancy, for sure. And I would also recommend taking a very good quality probiotic. You can get, probiotics that are specifically formulated for women. And I strongly recommend getting these from a credentialed healthcare professional, such as Dr. Brayton or myself, and perhaps include a supplement that helps to support your detoxification system. Now, yes, your detoxification system works on its own. Sometimes it's helpful if you can help it along, and you can use products. I would not buy these over the counter that contain things like broccoli seed extract or turmeric or green tea, which can help to potentiate the enzymatic processes in your detoxification system. So, we talked a little bit about methylated folate. That's everybody could take that at, definitely an 800 microgram value or a little. And for people who have the SNP, the MTHFR SNPs, you would take those. The sort of a detoxification supplement and a probiotic for sure, and probably a vitamin D supplement, particularly in these winter months. I mean, we're looking for you to have values of vitamin D at 80.
Yeah,
which is
definitely over 50.
Right, and it wasn't that long ago that labs were telling us that the number should be 30. So this is a big change, and it's actually a good story of how we came up with the number 80, and it has to do with Australian lifeguards. That is who sit in the sun all day, and their value is 80.
And they don't have to take any supplements.
No, if you're sitting in that chair in Australia, I don't know. Those guys look pretty good to me, so that must be the right value,
don't they?
Yes.
Oh, that's great. Oh, cool. Was there anything else was there something else you were saying regarding that?
No, I think that's it as far as, supplements are concerned.
You know what? Because we are talking about supplements and you're such an expert in that area, could you just speak to the difference between a prescription prenatal vitamin and a whole food prenatal vitamin?
Well, sure. Like a whole food prenatal vitamin is just that. It is something that's made from foods. Yeah. So it's very, a prescription prenatal vitamin is something that's man-made, that's made in a laboratory. But also the difference is going to be that the prescription prenatal vitamin is going to be something that's just a very basic level of nutrients to avoid disease, as we had discussed earlier. Whereas, a supplement that might be created from one of the brands that I use or Dr. Brayton uses, the amounts are very different. So that's where you see, a methylated folate being used, a higher amount. So the nutrient levels would be very different. And there's probably going to be, additional nutrients that you wouldn't find in the prescription.
Right, and also the way the body absorbs the nutrients is different, right?
Yes. Yeah. I mean, that's also going to depend on the brand. I mean, things get very specific. I mean, the basic advice is you want to get these products from a credentialed healthcare professional who has experience in functional medicine.
Yeah. Right. They're going to be able to really recommend what's best and, I think the challenge for a lot of women is, their OB can write them a prescription for a prenatal, and they can get it filled at their pharmacy and pay a small copay, but they're really not getting the value of a high-quality prenatal vitamin. They are not all created equal.
That's correct.
The whole food prenatal vitamins are going to cost more money, but this is really about, nourishing your body and your baby's body. So it's worth, in my mind, the extra money. The value is there.
Absolutely. And actually, there's one other thing that I realize. I'm looking at a coaster on my desk, and it's a coaster of a fish. We haven't discussed fish.
Oh, yeah.
And there's definitely two sides to the coin on fish, because I think that we know that there has been an enormous amount of contamination, PCBs and heavy metals in fish. And at the same time, I think we also know that fish has been thought of as a brain food. So what do you do about fish when you're pregnant? The first thing to do is you want to avoid any of the large deep water fish, because those are the fish that are older and they have been accumulating the toxins over time. You can also get if only I could think of the source of this. You can get a list of fish that are appropriate to consume during pregnancy, and actually to consume at any time, concerning the amount to have each week. So you're avoiding fish like shark and tuna, but the smaller fish are safer. And I would not consume any fish from China, or any of those areas, because fish is not something that is, there's no such thing as organic fish.
Right. And you know what? There's also that misconception that if it's raised in a farm, it's going to have less of that exposure to the heavy metals and the PCBs, mercury and such, than wild-caught fish. But then there's the whole other issue with farm-raised fish.
Right, and not all farm-raised fish is necessarily bad. So when you look at any of the bottom feeder fish, like, oysters and clams and things like that, farm-raised is actually better than wild, because that is a controlled environment for those type of fish. And yes, for salmon, we do want wild-caught salmon, but you do have to be careful on the amount of times a week that you eat fish, whether you're pregnant or not. And if I could think of the name of the source for that, I would give it to you. I'll have to, when you post this.
You know what, we'll look it up and I'll include it in the notes. Yeah, and on the iTunes link, sure. All right. Well, Laura, I'm so thankful for you to come on to the show today and share all this really wonderful wisdom with our listeners about really making smart, educated decisions regarding so many lifestyle choices as you're preparing your body for pregnancy, during the pregnancy as well, regarding your diet, your cleaning products, your personal care products, hydration, cookware, food storage. There were so many different aspects that we covered that all can actually impact our health and impact fertility and pregnancy.
Right, and thank you. It was my pleasure. And my last parting words, I think, would like to be, I don't want people to feel overwhelmed. If somebody's out there listening and they think, oh, my goodness, these are too many changes to make, just try to make one, and try to seek out a professional who can help and guide you along the way to put a plan into effect, to see how you can do things perhaps slowly over time. So don't feel like if you can't do it all that you shouldn't do anything. I never want people to walk away with that. So if you can just do one of those things and start now, that would be great.
Yeah, that's a really good point. It's just every little baby step makes an impact and makes a difference. And working with a healthcare provider can also give you some support and guidance to help hold your hand through the process as well.
Yes. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you.